Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We continue to learn Hilchas Yom Kippurim, and we begin today on Daf Ayin Zayin Amid Aleph. Hopefully we'll learn today Daf Ayin Zayin Amid Aleph as well as Daf Ayin Zayin Amid Beis. We pick up on the top line of Ayin Zayin Amid Aleph in Siman Taf Reish Yud Gimel Sif Beis. We have been discussing the Isser Rechitza, the prohibition to bathe and to wash oneself on Yom Kippurim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Beis, Neitel Adam Yadav Shachris. When you wake up in the morning, you could go wash netillas in the usual way. Umevarich al netillas yadayim, and you recite the bracha of al netillas yadayim just as you do every morning. V'yizahar, however, you should take care. Shelo yitayil ela atzoif kishrei etzba'osav. You should only wash until the end of the fingers, until the knuckles. At the end of the fingers, you should not wash past the knuckles. And says the Ramah, when you do wash, v'lo yechavein lahanas rechitza, you should not intend to have any pleasure. You shouldn't think that, it's going to feel so good to finally wash my hands with some cool water. No, you should not have any intention for hana of rechitza. Rak lahavir harach ra me'al hayadayim. Instead, your intent when you wash netillas should be to remove the rach ra, to remove that evil spirit that the Chazal tell us rests on the hands from sleeping overnight, and that rach ra is only removed by washing each hand 3 times from a keli. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Gimel. Neitel Adam Yadav Shachris, says the Mechaber, says the Chavetz Chaim here, Kedarkoi. He could wash netillas in his typical manner, Bechol Hashana, just as he does the rest of the year, Shalosh Pa'amim, 3 times each hand. Kevan de Beloizel lo yachal liga biyadav la peh v'lo einayim v'lo oizen mishum sakana. The reason this is mutter, and the reason this is mutter is because we know that before a person washes netillas, he can't touch his mouth, he can't touch his eyes, he can't touch his ears, he can't touch his nose, all because of sakana. Because, like we said, we know that the Chazal tell us there's a rach ra that rests on the fingers, and by touching any of these orifices of the body, it could allow somehow that rach ra to cause us harm. So therefore, you're allowed to wash your hands because, continues the Chavetz Chaim, Lo Gara, this is not any less me'im hayo meluchlach betit. We learned in Sif Aleph that you're not allowed to wash your hands because of hanas rechitza, but the Mechaber told us if your raglav shor gufay meluchlachim betit oy betzaya, if you're washing because your hands or your feet are dirty, then mutar l'rachatzam. Then we learned in Sif Aleph you're allowed to wash your hands. Over here, the Chavetz Chaim is saying, you know why you're allowed to wash netillas? You're allowed to wash netillas because before you do, you have a rach ra on your hands. That rach ra is no less than having your hands dirty. If your hands are physically dirty, you're allowed to wash them. So you're also allowed to wash them to remove a rach ra that could cause you damage. However, continues the Chavetz Chaim, Aval Panav lo yirchatz klal. However, you are not allowed to wash your face at all. V'ayin lekamon b'sif dalid. However, he does point us to the Mechaber in Sif dalid that is going to discuss washing the face in greater detail. Now, in the beginning of this Mishnah Berurah, he said over here that you could wash netillas kedarkoi b'chol hashana in your typical fashion, the way you do it the entire year. Shalosh pa'amim, 3 times on each hand. We know that there is a minhag brought down from the Gra. Some people wash 4 times each hand. So if you take a look in the Dirshu footnote number 6, Hitaka brings down over here, somebody who has the minhag to wash each hand 4 times, Kedas Hagra, as is the opinion of the Gra, Shehuva b'Mishnah Berurah La'el, Siman Dal Sif Cotton Yud. So then Das HaChazanish, then we have the opinion of the Chazanish, which he says is brought down in the name of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, quotes it from the Chazanish, Yom Kippur, that those who do have this minhag to wash each hand 4 times all year round, they're allowed to wash their hands 4 times on Yom Kippur as well. Okay, so you're allowed to wash netillas in the morning in the typical fashion, and the reason this is mutter is because you're not doing it for hanos rechitza, you're doing it to remove the ruach ra, and removing the ruach ra is mutter the same way you're allowed to wash your hands to remove physical dirt. Now we go to Siv Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Im hitel mayim, if somebody goes to the Beis HaKisei and he urinates, v'shif sheif b'yadai, and he wipes with his hand, and his fingers come into contact with the meraglayim, with the urine. I also tzrachav, or if somebody has a bowel movement, v'kinach, and he cleans himself. So again, he very possibly comes into contact with tsaya, with excrement. Mutter lerchaitz, he's allowed to wash his hands. Tahava leyadav mulachlachais, because now his hands are dirty. Not only is he allowed to wash his hand, to clean his hands, because his hands are physically dirty, he also has another problem, and that is immediately after exiting the Beis HaKisei, he has to make the bracha of Asher Yotzar, and he can't make the bracha of Asher Yotzar with dirty hands. So he's allowed to go ahead and wash his hands, and the Ramah says, V'roichetz ad soif kishrei etzba'osav, again, he should wash until the knuckles at the end of the fingers. Now let's read a little bit weiter, because we need this piece of information for the Mishnah Berurah. Continues the Mechaber, and the Mechaber says, V'im roitza lehispalel. Let's say this person who's coming out of the Beis HaKisei has to go daven. Let's say he went to the Beis HaKisei before Shachris or before Mincha. So not only does he have an issue that he has to make the bracha of Asher Yotzar, not only does he have an issue that his hands are physically dirty, but he has another issue as well, which is that he has to daven. He has to daven Shemona Esrei. That's what it means here, lehispalel. It means to daven Shemona Esrei. Then says the Mechaber, afilu loy kinach nami muter litoil ad soif kishrei etzba'osav. Then, even if you did not wipe yourself and you didn't come into contact with excrement, still, the fact that you went to the Beis HaKisei, you used the Beis HaKisei, you're allowed to wash your hands. So over here so far, here in the Mechaber, we have the following distinction. He says, if somebody went to the Beis HaKisei and he came into contact with the urine or with the tsaya, so then he's allowed to go wash his hands because his hands are dirty and he has to make a bracha of Asher Yotzar. So if he came into contact with the urine or with the tsaya, he's allowed to go ahead and wash his hands. And then the Mechaber says, now, if somebody has to daven, if somebody has to say Shemona Esrei, he has to daven Shachris, he has to daven Mincha, if he has to say Shemona Esrei, so then, in that case, says the Mechaber, then even if you did not come into contact with the urine or with the tsaya, just the fact that you went to the Beis HaKisei, you're already allowed to wash your hands. So now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and daled. V'shiv sheif b'yadai ay asa tzrachav v'kinach. Okay, the first halacha that the Mechaber said was somebody used the Beis HaKisei and he cleaned himself, so he came into contact either with the urine or with the excrement. Says the Mishnah Berurah, then he's allowed to go ahead and wash his hands. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Miloshen zeh, from the language of the Mechaber, mashma, it is directly implied, the imloi kinach bigdolim, that if he did not wipe himself after a bowel movement, v'loi shivsheif b'ketanim, or he didn't touch himself and come into contact with urine after urinating, asur loy lirchaitz, then it would be forbidden to wash, right? Because that's what the Mechaber says. The Mechaber says you went to the Beis HaKisei, if you came into contact with the urine or the excrement, then you're allowed to wash. But if you did not, then just because you used the Beis HaKisei, that does not give you license to wash your hands on Yom Kippur. That's the implication of the Mechaber. However, it says the Chavetz Chaim, ube'emes, the truth is, yesh machloikes hapoiskim bozeh. This question is subject to a difference of opinion amongst the poskim. The yesh oimrim, because there are those that say da'afilu loy kinach v'shivsheif, that if somebody used the Beis HaKisei, even if he did not wipe himself or touch the urine, yesh loy lirchaitz yadav, he still has to wash his hands, mishum hikain likras elikecha Yisrael, because of the pasuk in Amos that says that before somebody, so to speak, greets the Rabbeinu Shalom, he has to prepare himself. Hikain, prepare yourself, likras elikecha, to greet your God, Yisrael, Klal Yisrael. So before you go ahead and make a bracha of Asher Yotzar, before you come to the Rebbeinu Shalom and address the Rebbeinu Shalom with a bracha, you have to do hikain. You have to prepare yourself. What does that mean to prepare yourself? Well, if you just came out of the Beis HaKisei, you have to wash your hands. So here we have a machlokes ha-poskim, says the Mishnah Berurah. There are those poskim that say that just by virtue of the fact that you used the Beis HaKisei and now you have to make an Asher Yotzar, even if you did not touch the urine or the excrement, you already have to wash your hands because of hikain likras alikecha Yisrael. But the Mechaber said not that way. The Mechaber said only if you touched the urine or the excrement. These poskim who say that you could wash your hands because of hikain, the reason it's hikain is because you have to make a bracha of Asher Yotzar. So what do we do now that we have this machlokes ha-poskim? Says the Chavetz Chaim v'alkein, since we do have this difference of opinion, hiskimu ha'achronim, the achronim reached a conclusion, and he quotes over here the Bach, the Magen Avram, and others, did nachain lechatchila, that lechatchila it would be proper lekaneach, to make sure that you do wipe yourself, or l'shavshev, and to make sure that you do wipe away any little drips of urine, so that you do come into contact with the urine. Kedei lahoitzi nafshe mi plukta, because by doing that, you remove yourself from the subject of this dispute. If you came into contact with the excrement of the urine, then everybody agrees that you have a license to wash your hands before you make the Asher Yotzar. So don't leave yourself in a makam safek. Don't leave yourself in this doubtful situation where you have to make the Asher Yotzar after using the Beis HaKisei, but you didn't come into contact with the tzaya or the meraglayim. Then you have the question of the machlokes ha-poskim. Don't leave yourself there. Make sure that you do come into contact with the tzaya or the meraglayim, and therefore you could certainly wash your hands. Because then everybody agrees that you could wash. Now, says the Chavetz Chaim, realize when this whole issue is negeya. B'ameh dvarim amurim, when does this whole question come up? B'leil Yom Kippurim achar hatfila. This whole question is only negeya Yom Kippur night after you already finished davening Ma'ariv. So it's Yom Kippur night, you finish davening Ma'ariv, you go home, you use the Beis HaKisei. That's when this question is negeya, because you used the Beis HaKisei, and now you have the question of making Asher Yotzar. And you want to know, if you didn't come into contact with the tzaya, the meraglayim, should I wash my hands to make the Asher Yotzar because of hikain? Or maybe like the Mechaber, I can't wash my hands. Why isn't it negeya by day? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. Aval bayayim, but by day, by Yom Kippur, by day, this whole shaila is not negeya. Why? Shemispalelin kol hayayim. Because during the day on Yom Kippur, when is the shaila coming up? You used the Beis HaKisei before you daven Shemona Esrei of Shachris? Okay, so then you have to go daven. Right? And the Mechaber told us, if you have to say Shemona Esrei, then even the Mechaber agrees that even if you didn't touch the tzaya of the meraglayim, you're allowed to wash your hands. So therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim over here, Aval bayayim, by Yom Kippur by day, Shemispalelin kol hayayim, where all day you're going to be busy davening. You have to daven Shemona Esrei for Shachris, you have to daven Shemona Esrei for Musaf, you have to daven Shemona Esrei for Mincha, you have to daven Shemona Esrei for Ne'ilah. So whenever it is that you're going to the Beis HaKisei on Yom Kippur, even if you didn't touch the tzaya with the meraglayim, you're going to be allowed to wash your hands because there's always going to be an upcoming Shemona Esrei. And therefore by day this whole shaila is not negeya. And you can see this spelled out in the Sharet Zion as Katan Zion. He's bringing this down from the Magen Avram, and he says a Ritzayna Loimar, what the Chavetz Chaim, what the Magen Avram is saying over here is the Hayiyah Tzarech Lehispal Musaf Umincha Uniila. So the shaila is never going to be negeya on Yom Kippur proper, because you're always going to have a Shemona Esrei that you have to say. And then he points out here in the Sharet Zion, Umisham Shar Divrei Kedusha, as far as the other Dvarim Shebekdusha that you're going to be reciting on Yom Kippur, Kegoin Tfilos Upiyutim Shanu Aimrim, like the other Tfilos and the other Piyutim that we're saying all day on Yom Kippur, Umisham Lavarach Asher Yotzar Balvad, or just because you need to say Asher Yotzar, Kvar Kosav the Tov Sheyishav Shev Kedei Lo Hitzi Nafshe Mi Plukta. That the Chavetz Chaim already addressed by saying, if it's just for the Asher Yotzar, or it's just for Piyutim, or it's just for Slichus, then the halacha would be, make sure to touch the meraglayim or the tzaya to take yourself out of the suffix. But this is what the Chavetz Chaim is adding. Realize that this whole shaila is not negea by day, because by day you're always going to have an upcoming Shemoneh Esrei, and even the Mechaber agrees that if you have an upcoming Shemoneh Esrei, you could wash your hands simply because you have to daven Shemoneh Esrei. Okay, let's go weiter. Ois cotton hay in the Mishnah Berurah. Ve'im roitza lehispalel. The Mechaber told us ve'im roitza lehispalel afilu loikinach. The Mechaber said, if you're going to be davening Shemoneh Esrei, then even if you did not touch the excrement or the meraglayim, the tzaya or the meraglayim, you're allowed to wash your hands. Says the Chavetz Chaim, again we have an interesting implication from the Mechaber. Mashma mizeh, the implication of the Mechaber is, the imloy asa tzrach of klal. Let's say you did not go to the Beis HaKisei. What halach is the Mechaber telling me? The Mechaber is telling me if you used the Beis HaKisei and now you have to daven Shemoneh Esrei, you're allowed to wash your hands. How about if I wanted to daven Shemoneh Esrei, but I did not use the Beis HaKisei? Am I allowed to wash my hands in preparation of davening? Take a look, come into the Beis Medrash, let's say by Mincha every day. You see people come into the shul, they go straight to the sink to wash their hands in preparation of davening Shemoneh Esrei. That we brought down earlier in Chelek Aleph, that's a mitzvah. So are you allowed to do that on Yom Kippur? Or is it only if you used the Beis HaKisei? So says the Chavetz Chaim, the implication over here from the Mechaber is that you're only allowed to wash your hands for Shemoneh Esrei if you used the Beis HaKisei. But if you did not, you should refrain from washing. Ein lo lital yadayim b'shvil tefila bilvad. You should not wash your hands just in preparation for Shemoneh Esrei. After Mavur la'el b'siman reish lamed gimel sif beis, even though we learned previously in siman reish lamed gimel and sif beis, the b'shvil tefila bilvad mitzvah lital yadayim, that there's always a mitzvah to wash your hands in preparation of reciting Shemoneh Esrei. Hacha, but over here on Yom Kippur, Misham Chaimer Yom Kippurim, because of the stringency of the halacha of the prohibition to wash on Yom Kippur, Chashash la'oisan hapaiskim, we concern ourselves with the opinion of those paiskim, tesavri who hold the b'shvil tefila bilvad lo tikdu lital yadayim, that just because you're davening Shemoneh Esrei, there is no takana that you have to wash your hands just to go daven Shemoneh Esrei, unless you know that you used the Beis HaKisei. Kiyem b'shachris, the only time that everybody agrees that you have to wash your hands in preparation of Shemoneh Esrei is by shachris, mishum danasa kibriya chadasha, because we know that when you wake up in the morning, we have this concept that you're nasa kibriya chadasha. It's like you were newly created, and for that you have to wash your hands before you daven Shemoneh Esrei. Okay. Now we go to the Ramah. Let's go to the Ramah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the middle of the line. Haga. V'chein kayin ha'oila laduchan. So to a kayin who's going up to the duchan for birchas kaihanim. We know that the kaihanim wash their hands before duchaning. The Leviim come and they wash the hands of the kaihanim. Noitel yadav, the kayin should wash his hands before duchaning on Yom Kippur. Afal pi shehein tahiros. Even if he knows that his hands are really clean. He knows that he didn't go to the Beis HaKisei. He knows he didn't touch a makom mechusa on his body. So he knows his hands are clean. Yet, in preparation of duchening, you have to go wash your hands. The chol roiv rechitza she'ena mechaven bal tainug, because all types of washing where you're not washing for pleasure, muteres, are permitted. And over here, he's washing to duchen. He's not washing for tainug. He's not washing for any kind of pleasure, and therefore this washing is muter on Yom Kippur. V'lachein, and therefore, says the Ramah, afilu ba'min aderech, even people, somebody who comes in from a journey, for ragl of kehos, and his feet are aching, his feet are bothering him, mutal l'rachtzan, he's allowed to wash his feet to ease the discomfort of his feet, because that's not for tainug. He's suffering, he's in pain. Ragl of Keos means that he's uncomfortable. His feet, I don't know exactly what the metzias of this is. Somehow after a long walk, his feet are bothering him. And in order to take away the discomfort, he wants to wash his feet. That would be mutter on Yom Kippur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Vav. Ad Soif Kishrei Etzba Oisav. Oh, I'm sorry. That was actually on the Mechaber. I missed that one. The Mechaber had said that before Shemona Esrei, if you use the Beis HaKisei, and now you have to daven Shemona Esrei, you're allowed to wash, and again, you wash until the knuckles at the end of the fingers. However, you cannot wash beyond that point. And this is true even if you used the Beis HaKisei and you wiped yourself and you came into contact with the tzaya, you're still not allowed to wash beyond the knuckles at the end of the fingers. He says, take a look at the Derech Chaim. The same halacha applies if somebody touched a part of his body that is normally covered and it's an area that is dirty with perspiration. Still, you don't wash, you wash your fingers, but not past the knuckles. Even if you only touched that area of the body with one finger, you still have to wash your entire hand until the knuckles. If somebody touched dirt or mud, then you only have to wash the place on your fingers that got dirty. And that's true even in preparation for Shemona Esrei. So if you touched a makom mechusa on your guf, if you touched a makom zeya, a place that's dirty with perspiration on your body, then even if you only touched it with the tip of one finger, you have to wash your entire hand. But if you touched mud, you touched dirt, you only have to wash off the dirt, and indeed you're only allowed to wash off the dirt. You don't have to wash your entire hand. Ice cotton zayin. The Ramah said that the kain ha'ola l'duchan, the kain that's going up to duchan, has to wash his hands. Noitel yadav v'netilahu ad haperek. Very interesting. That washing for the kain would be up to the wrist, not up to kishrei etzba'isav. You see, the washing that the kain does when he goes up to the duchan, that's supposed to be a washing like the kain in the Beis Hamikdash did before he did the avodah, kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. And by kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, the kain had to wash up to the perek, up until the wrist. So too over here, when the kain is going up to the duchan, it's not enough for him to wash at kishrei etzba'isiv. He has to wash at a perek. He has to wash until the wrist. Continuing, Ice Cotton Zayin, Kamavur La'el B'Siman Kuf Chav Ches Sivav. This is like we learned earlier in Siman Kuf Chav Ches in Sivav. Ice Cotton Ches. The Ramah said, why is it mutter for the kain ha'ola l'duchan to wash himself? The chol roiv rechitza. Very strange turn of phrase. The chol roiv rechitza. Because all of the majority of washing, she'ena mechavam balatainig, with the intent is not for pleasure, muteris. What is this word roiv? So the Chavetz Chaim says here, Ayin b'Maimar Mordechai, sheniskasha al tevas roiv. The Maimar Mordechai doesn't know what this word roiv is doing over here. And he says, and the truth is, that this is, the Ramah brings this down from the Agos Maimoni. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, if you look in the actual Agos Maimoni, this word roiv does not appear there, so this word roiv would seem to be either extraneous or something else, but we definitely don't seem to have a pirush at what the word roiv over here would mean. Okay, now we go to Sif Dalet. Says the Mechaber, Mi shehu istinis, somebody who is of, I guess, delicate condition, somebody who's finicky, somebody who's very delicate. Ve'ein daitoi miyusheves alav, and he can't get his mind settled ad sheyiganeach panav b'mayim, until he washes his face. You have that person who, until he washes his face in the morning, he's just uncomfortable and he can't get himself put together. And he's really suffering because of it. Mutter, he's allowed to wash his face. And again, the reason is because the rechitza that's also at Yom Kippurim is again a rechitza shel tainug. This is not a rechitza shel tainug. This person somehow can't get it together until he washes his face. So then he's allowed to wash his face. However, says the Ramah, Hagah, V'nagu bazel hachmir, our minig is to rule stringently in regard to this question, and we say that even an istanis should be machmir, he should be stringent, and he should not wash his face. V'afilu b'rechitza sa'inayim, even when it comes to the question of washing the eyes, shehitzas refuah, which the Ramah says there's even an aspect of refuah, when it comes to washing the eyes. There is a Maimer Chazal that says that a little bit of water on the eyes is like, I don't remember what the Chazal say, but they say it's very, very, very helpful for the body, the washing of the eyes. So the Ramah says, even though washing the eyes could almost be categorized as a refuah, nagu lahachmir, still we're noig to be machmir, not to wash the eyes. V'asar lechaitz piv b'Yom Kippurim, and you're not allowed to rinse out your mouth in Yom Kippur. K'maishin ispar le'el siman tavkav sam zayin siv gimel in Hilchas Tisha B'av, where we say have the same halacha. We don't want you to wash out your mouth because we're afraid that you're going to come to swallow some of the liquid that you use to rinse out your mouth. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and test. The Mechaber said that an instantis is allowed to wash his face. The Ramah said, "V'nagu bazel achmir." The minig is to be machmir and to not allow even an instantis to wash his face. V'impanov maluklok tzas. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, if your face is somewhat dirty, or sheyesh lo liflof al einoi, or if you have, the English word is escaping me right now. It's exu something, but if you have fluid that exuded from your eye, so your eye is like pasty or crusty, so you could wet your finger in water, and you could wash off the crustiness from your eye or the dirt from your face. You could do this where you're dirty. Or you could do to your eye whatever you need to do to your eye to get that crusty stuff off of your eye. However, you have to be careful to only wash the area that taka is dirty. Don't end up washing your whole eye just because, I'm washing my eye already, I'll wash the rest of my eye. Eyes cut in Yud. The Ramah said, even though Rechitzas Ha'inayim is K'tzas Refuah, still, you're not allowed to do it unless your eye is dirty and crusty. Shiktzas refuah, aval mishum refuah gemura mutar lerchaitz b'makom she'ein iser mishum refuah b'Shabbos. The Ramah said that the washing of the eyes that's a k'tzas refuah nagu lahachmer. But the Chavetz Chaim says if it would be a real refuah, if somebody has a problem with his eye and he needs to wash it out for refuah purposes, so then he says that would be mutar lerchaitz b'makom she'ein iser mishum refuah b'Shabbos. You would be allowed to do it as long as now the iser of refuah isn't going to kick in. We know that on Shabbos and Yom Tov you're not allowed to do things for refuah purposes because of the gzeira of shchikas samamonim. We're afraid that if you're going to engage in practices that cause refuah, you might come to grind things up to make medications. That's the gzeira of mishum shchikas samamonim. So what the Chavetz Chaim is telling you over here is, if you need a refuah in your eye, then you're allowed, then the iser of rechitza on Yom Kippurim goes off, because you're allowed to wash for refuah. You're only not allowed to wash for tainug, but for refuah you are allowed to wash. But the Chavetz Chaim cautions us, if you're going to do refuah, you have to make sure that it's a type of refuah that you're allowed to do on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Ordinarily on Shabbos and Yom Tov you're not allowed to do refuah. You have to make sure that it's a type of refuah that you are allowed to do on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So it has to be something that's causing a problem for the entire guf. It has to be nafal lemishkav. There are different tanoim that you have to have in order to be able to do refuah on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, it's cutting it out. Piv, you're not allowed to rinse out your mouth. Says the Chavetz Chaim, why is that? Shema yivlak tas begroinoi, because we're afraid you might actually come to swallow some of the liquid. That's why you're not allowed to rinse out your mouth on Yom Kippur. Okay, I'm going to stop over here momentarily. I intend on doing another shir immediately following this shir. So this shir will be Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, and Mir Hashem, I'm going to record now Ayin Zayin Amud Beis as well. I'm just going to break for a few minutes. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan on Gans Klal Yisrael, and the Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs and parnasa to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BS Gal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.